Well, because I forgot to hit record, I get to do the entire lecture again. Jacob, you're still online, but if you hear me, you're just going to hear the same slides again. So feel free to um, log off, and that's fine. In the meantime, I'm going to get going so I can actually have it recorded and be able to upload it for the students who need that. It is now recording, which is good. You're in week 11. So the Institute of Systemic Leadership. You've got a source in the module from them. Make sure that you read that. As systems thinkers, we look at the elements and the interconnectedness that they possess. We have to remember that we ultimately seek to view the system in a holistic manner. We use analysis to understand the elements, and then we step back and we use a synthesis to view the entire system. The elements could be policies, practices, people, products, services. So the elements are the components that make up the system, if that makes sense. Systems can be open or closed, yet in my experience, I've found that closed systems typically only occur in a laboratory setting. That's because external factors can impact a system. So there's really no systems here on Earth outside of a laboratory where factors from outside of that system do not have an effect. Whether it's friends, family, other social groups, church groups, whatever, there is always the influence of these other systems. And each person belongs to, on average, between 5 to 7 different systems at any given time. So when we're working with people in a system, we have to understand we're looking at them in that system, but they themselves, their identity, their perspective, their belief are facets that come from a multitude of systems combined. So when conducting systems thinking, you have to establish the boundaries of that system. Otherwise, as you're going to see, it becomes really complicated really fast. That's because we might be looking at a system that is this class, but that class is part of Cleary University or academics, the academic department, which is part of Cleary University. Each one of these could be viewed as a system, or they could be viewed independently as a system. If I'm looking at Cleary University as a system, the elements that I would be considering change slightly. Okay. The interconnectedness will change slightly. And you're going to be seeing this as we go through the next few weeks. In your material, the system that was evaluated was an educational system, but an evaluation, that evaluation could be for a particular school or district. So you could look at the entirety of the educational system, or you could look at just higher education, or you could look at one one school district, local school district, or you could look at a single high school or elementary school. So you have to determine the boundaries of that system. You also have to establish what the level of leadership for that system is, and that's where you set your hierarchical limits. So who is the leader? In the system of this class, I would be the leader. In the system of Cleary University, I am not the leader. Okay, so it depends on how you put boundaries on that system, and then you identify the hierarchical, those that lead it. An organization as an entity can suffer systemic failure. This occurs in the whole system or high-level system where there is a failure between and within the system elements that need to work together for overall success. So if the interconnectedness is not positive, if the interconnectedness is absent, then that system is going to fail. The elements make up the system, but the interconnectedness is what makes that system be and do. You can have things that negatively impact a system. Factors in systemic failure may include confused goals, weak system-wide understanding, flawed design, individual incentives that encourage loyalty to subordinate rather than superordinate goals, inadequate feedback, poor cooperation, lack of accountability. Most of that is pretty straightforward, but that the subordinate goals versus the superordinate goals. Okay, so a system could fail because we don't understand the goals of the system, what the mission and vision are for that system, for that organization, that team. We have to understand that the team or the system, the organization, creates the goals for that system, for that whole organization. The goals don't come from inside, they come from the top down. Not necessarily the leadership, but when we think of the system as an entity, as a being, from the system, and then the elements or the cells inside that system, then do the functions to carry out that task. Another quote from the Institute of Systemic Leadership: whole system success requires a performance management system that is pitched above the level of individual systems and their functional leadership. So within Clear University, there needs to be some sort of motivation and reward system in place from the top for the entire system. Okay. It's not something that the system down here, the elements create. It's the system, the brain of the system creates that for the entire system. These may include team level goal setting, development, incentives, communication, reviews, rewards, and accountability. So you see a lot of things that are learned in organizational behavior for how to motivate your employees pertain here to this as well. That's because there's a merge. We are learning how to see these concepts that you may already have learned about, but you're learning a different way of viewing them through learning systems thinking. So have you noticed that there are many aspects found in both system success and failure? And we've already covered many of them. Team goals, communication, accountability, feedback, elements working together, interconnectedness. Every aspect here that will cause a system to succeed or fail relates to interconnectedness. System success and failure may happen at the same time. You could be failing in some aspects and succeeding in others. Yet overall, is that system a success or a failure? That's why we evaluate systems, to understand that. The system needs to be understood not only in the width and the height, but the original purpose and intended goals along with external and internal pressures. So when we're evaluating a system, we have to understand its parameters. Otherwise, instead of evaluating the system that is this class, we might want to evaluate all Dr. G's classes. So we want to limit that system to exactly what we want to be evaluating. It also reduces the number of elements being analyzed. So as we enter into the book by Barry Oshry, Seeing Systems, Unlocking the Mysteries of Organizational Life, I want to explain what system blindness is. System blindness occurs whether they are often led and they think they have control over their lives. So if people are being led, but they don't see that leadership, that's system blindness. We each belong to 5 to 7 different systems: your family, your friends, your extended family, social groups like churches, your school, any social groups you're a part of. I think I already said that. These are all systems, and we get part of our identity from these various systems. Tafel et al. In 1971 described how we as human beings, we get our personal identity based on the social groups we are a part of. These are systems. And so when we're evaluating a system, we have to understand that each element belongs to a number of different systems, and that due to that, their beliefs, their perspectives, their behavior are actually derived from these different systems. We can't view a person in a system as being solely in that one system. That's why there's no closed systems, because things from other systems affect people in this system that we're evaluating. These individuals tend to think that they are the way that they are and that they believe how and what they believe simply due to who they are. Well, that's not truly the truth now, is it? We have the belief system we are. We are who we are because, yes, genetically, I'm Brian. Mentally, I'm Brian. But Brian is a composite, an amalgamation from his parents, their social conditioning through my childhood, the schools I attended growing up, the people I hung out with, friends of the family, the social groups my family was a part of. And so it's very complex. And through the years, I was in the Navy, the Army, various different things. These added to my beliefs, these added to my ability to perceive the world around me. It's sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. And the same is true for everybody in a system. So when you're analyzing the elements, you have to consider that. Human nature causes us to think more highly of ourselves than we should. I found that humanity essentially, in seeing systems and being a systems thinker, that we can think we're more intelligent than we really are. We can think that we're more important than we are. We can believe that our perspective is the only correct one. And progress is possible when we understand that everyone is equal and that everyone is just as complex and nuanced as we ourselves are. So psychological safety for teams does play into this as well. As a matter of fact, whoever developed this course, pairing psychological safety for teams and systems thinking was ingenious. They worked so good together. People are who they are and believe what they believe due to the many systems that impact their lives. Roshi points that out as a very valid statement. I've seen that lived out many times. The above explanations are required. We require one further step of clarification. When we as systems thinkers look at a system, we must not fall into the quote unquote normal way of viewing others, which includes thinking that the employees or the other elements in that system act the way they do simply because of who they are as individuals. No, 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 no. That's a part of it. But they are made up of all this social conditioning caused by all these other systems that they've had throughout their life. Not just the systems they're a part of now, but the systems any system they've ever been a part of has had an effect on them and who they are. We have to remember that many systems continually impact people outside of that one we're looking at. So if we're evaluating their work system, we have to think they've got a family system, they've got an extended family system, they've got their social group systems, they have any clubs they belong to, athletic groups they belong to, any online groups they belong to. And all of these impact how that person works and cooperates inside of the system we're evaluating. Now there's temporal blindness, and temporal blindness occurs when the system's history is not considered. Every system has got a story. Now, if that story is fictional, it is contrived, it's developed, and is put in place of real events if we neglect the reality of that system. As a matter of fact, it changes how we view that system. So if we don't have access to the real history for that system, we as people, we want to make sense of things. So we engage in sense making. We create stories that make sense to us, but they may not be true, which means now we're operating with a falsehood when we're looking at the system. And that creates difficulty interconnecting within that system. So people get confused if they have a false narrative about the system they're a part of, or any of the systems they're a part of. People make decisions based on that information, and it's the information they have available at that moment. And that false information leads to disastrous consequences. These false beliefs, false histories, become the truth that guides their significant decisions, actions, and reactions. Problem with these false histories is they may sound and seem true and valid. But when we really dig into the history of that system, they're actually false. We need the true stories of that system. in order to properly function within it. Oshry wrote, the challenge is to be able to move past our local picture and the imperfect truths it generates to seeing the larger picture and the truths it reveals. That's why we want to go back to the true history, the true story of that system. The local picture, if it's based on falsehoods, can make the situation appear worse than it actually is. We might blame ourselves. We might assign guilt to other people. We might be influenced by gossip or rumors, when all it really takes is knowing the true story of that system. We may not correctly interpret the risk of that system. We might even judge people in that system wrongly, and we become ineffective and timid within that system. So there is a need for truth in systems. When we are stuck in that local picture perspective, remember that local picture perspective can easily be based on a falsehood. We can feel like we have little or no control over the circumstances, and we might feel like we're stuck in a position of no control, like in a pinball machine. If a person in that system forgets to consider the actual historical events in the lives of others, all they see is that local picture, they will still receive words, actions, and deeds from others, but they may be misunderstood because they're based on a falsehood. We continually receive information from people around us in that system. Still, if we do not have the actual true history, we make up explanations, false stories, false narratives to make sense of it. This can lead us to make improper evaluations, to label other people as being evil and malicious when that's just not true. We can even think or believe that the other individuals in that system are attacking us when that's not true. This can lead us to react, get angry, become distant, hurt, depressed, anxious. We can lose sight of our goals and become distracted. It can even lead to us giving false information, words, actions, or deeds to those around us, which just perpetuates the cycle. Now, what do we have? We got a diminished capacity for any true partnerships to develop in that system. And true partnerships, that's the interconnectedness that we keep talking about. Those partnerships working together. So you're going to hear some terminology over the next number of weeks, and I want to go through it so you know what we're talking about. Tops. These are individuals in the system that have overall responsibility for some piece of the action. Senior leadership in that system. Middles are caught between the conflicting demands of the people on the bottom and the priorities of the people at the top. Bottoms are on the receiving end of initiatives over which they have no control. Customers, they look to another person or group for a product or service. We each are a top in some systems in our lives, middles in others, and bottoms yet in the rest, or maybe a customer. So I might be a top when we look at the system as this class as a system. I'm the professor. I would be the top. But when we look at Cleary University, I become a bottom. When we look at academics, I become a middle. And that's like this. It's that same thing, that same way throughout all the different systems I'm a part of. In some, I'm a top. In others, I'm a middle. And it depends on the width and breadth of the scope of the system I'm considering at that moment, whether I'm a top, middle, or bottom. This is why it's so important to properly set the limits for the systems you are evaluating. I'm going to put a video up from Barry Oshry on systems as patterns of systemic relationships, because that relationship, that's that interpersonal connection, that interconnectedness that we talk so much about and that we're going to continue talking about. And I want you to have a better understanding of it. So it's not in your material, but I will put it in the announcements. Okay, we'll skip on a couple more slides. Tops have overall responsibility for some piece of the action. Middles are caught between conflicting demands and priorities. Bottoms are on the receiving end of initiatives over which we have no control, and customers look to another person or group for a product or service. I know, I said that twice now, because it's important. You've got to understand how to best determine if an element is a top, a middle, a bottom, or a customer. If you're looking at yourself, you got to understand, are you a top, a middle, a bottom, or a customer in the system you are evaluating, that you're looking at, that you're thinking about. Some types of tops. You got senior leadership, coaches of sports teams, deans of colleges, leaders of countries. Once again, that's for the really grand, large scope system. When we start bringing it down, suddenly the people that were in the middle become the top. And other times, the people at the bottom become the top, and other people might become bottoms. So you have to mark off the boundaries of that system. Habits of middles, middle management, team captains, department heads of colleges, senators, congressmen, congresswomen. Anybody that's got to go to someone else for resources to then give it to the people beneath them, the bottoms, because the middle doesn't have the resources, but they get all the needs from the bottoms and they get all the priorities from the tops, and they're caught between them and they're going to be torn apart. So have patience with people in the middle. And the bottoms, employees, sports team captains, even professors, depending on how you delineate that system, constituents, students, children. We've already covered that. And we're going to stop there for the video. That's where I stopped in the class itself earlier. I apologize that I had to redo the lecture, but I'm not having to do that as often. But I guess I was just due for that to happen again. So anyway, thank you for your time. Watch this video. Please contact me if you have any questions. It is your responsibility to look at Canvas at your grades. And if you're missing assignments, you need to submit assignments. You got 4 weeks that an assignment can be late. You lose 10% per week. On discussions, you have 3 days that it could be late and you lose 10% per day. So it's not my place to tell you if you're missing work. You can access that on Canvas. So make sure you do that, okay? Thank you very much. You have a great rest of your day, afternoon, evening, or morning.